know this is a topic that so many people in my community really resonate with.
If we did all the right things, if we made the right decision, went to the right school and the right job and whatever, we'd be happy. And we weren't. I realized it was an epidemic. There were so many of us and nobody was talking about it. The thing that I've discovered in doing this work, that it's not achievement that leads to fulfillment, it's alignment.
When I left, I did sit down and wrote out a business plan. But the business plan I wrote out, if I look at that and compare it to what I'm doing now, they could not be more different.
Yeah, clarity comes in motion. You really can't get the information that you need about what is aligned for you while you're staying still.
Okay, but what if I don't have the financial privilege?
You do not need to quit your job or blow up your whole life in order to make changes.
All right, well, it's actually fun to see you.
I know.
I was literally thinking about that when you walked in. I was like, oh, I've never actually met you in person.
Isn't that funny? I have a lot of clients like that actually, who I've never seen them in person. I feel like we know each other so well. And and then it's like we haven't seen each other, and then it's like a whole
Before COVID, well, were you doing this pre-COVID?
Yeah, I've been doing it for 10 years.
And were you doing it always remote?
No, I was doing 50-50 remote and in person in the city, but I had clients internationally. So sometimes I was doing it remote, but for people in the city I was doing, and then COVID happened and I just went all remote. And most people prefer it that way anyway. So.
Well, I think about this all the time with my therapist because we were in person pre-COVID. Then we went remote, and then we just never went back because I don't live in New York anymore. But I'm wondering what that would be like to have formed such a deep, intimate relationship, kind of like we have started online and then meet in person, because I don't know, people say that to me sometimes if I meet them on the street. They're like, I feel like I know you so well and I don't, and now I'm seeing you and it's weird.
It might be different also between us because I feel like I have I know what you look like because you're so online. True. And I mean obviously you've probably seen pictures of me, whatever, but I'm not as online. And so I don't know. I'm sure it's weird.
Well, it's fun. I'm excited to chat because I love the work that we've been doing, even though it's been, what has it been, a month? A little bit more? 2 months?
2.
Yeah, probably. But also in tandem listening to your book on Audible so that I could really prepare for this and get more of an inside look into the work that you're doing alongside with me, but with other people. And because I know this is a topic that so many people in my community really resonate with. Even just when I posted your book, people were like, okay, I feel called out just by the chapter title was Underfulfilled Overachiever. Yeah. So I want to start back with your upbringing because I know I resonate with an underfulfilled overachiever. I'm assuming you do as well, given that you wrote this and now work on this. What was your upbringing like and your relationship with achieving and accolades and I guess keeping yourself busy? What did your childhood look like?
Yeah, and I consider myself the original underfulfilled overachiever. I didn't have that language for it at the time. I wish I had, and that was part of why I came to this work, as most people kind of in this line of work, where I ended up creating what I needed and couldn't find. Yeah. For me, I was a box checker. I was someone who did all of the right things, checked all the boxes. Growing up, I was oldest child of 2 oldest children who were both lawyers, and it was a very achievement-oriented culture. And I went to a very competitive private school in New York City where I was the top of my class and doing all the things and taking all the AP classes and the captain of all the sports and just doing all of the things and really I don't know, I guess fancied myself this Renaissance woman. I don't know. And then graduated, went to Stanford, and quickly fell into working at Google while I was out there without really having a lot of intention or really thinking through what is it that I want? Do I really want to do this? I kind of just fell into everything, and I don't feel like I was ever taught how to discern between what other people thought I should do versus what I wanted to do. And some of that is developmental, right? It's important that we absorb the norms of people around us, and hopefully they are, ethical, supportive norms for the most part. But I think what happened to me is I started to value and have my self-worth dependent on my achievement. And that was how I got attention, and that was how I got love, and that was how I distinguished myself, and it really became kind of the centerpiece of my identity. And then beyond even my family, was reinforced by once I was into the workforce and going to school, it's like you introduce yourself. You're like, hi, I'm Megan. And, somebody introduced me. Hi, this is Megan. She went to Stanford and works at Google. And it's like instant admiration, right?
Totally. And
it's hard. It's really hard to step away from that. But my body sort of did it for me. I knew kind of from the very beginning when I started working at Google that this was not the thing for me. But it was so like glamorous in some ways. It was like out in Mountain View, and it was the beginning of like, the tech culture where there were like massages at work, and I was getting paid more than I thought, and they would do my dry cleaning, and they like shuttled me to work, and I like met my boyfriend at work, and so we would like, it was like this whole culture, and it consumed me, and it became my whole life, and I was just like climbing the ladder, and when you're in that bubble, it's so hard to imagine anything else being worthwhile. And if
what I envision, not to cut you off, but I said this to my dad when he left his really intense job, and it was 6 months after I had left JP Morgan. It feels like you're a horse on a horse race, and you have those actual blinders on, and you can't see the outside world. All you can see is what's right in front of you, and you're in this fishbowl of people who are all feeling and doing the same thing. So you think it's almost normal to work at that pace, or to feel that intensity, or to be that competitive. And it's just all you know and all you see, and you're just immune to the outside world. And then when I left, I felt the blinders were removed, and I had this moment of, whoa, there's a universe out here.
Yeah.
There are other people.
Yeah. And I think it's really hard to have that sensation without leaving.
Totally.
I would bring it up to people like, I don't know about this. Like, I don't know if this really feels fulfilling. And everyone would be like, you are crazy to leave this job. This is the best job in the world. You don't know how bad it is out there. Like, nothing is going to compare to this. And so I started internalizing that, and I felt really ashamed. Like, I have so much privilege. I have this amazing education. I'm at the best job in the world. If this isn't working for me, then something must be wrong with me. And maybe I secretly hate working, and I'm just like secretly lazy. And so I just kept doing the thing. And I often talk about blind ambition versus aligned ambition, and we can get into that, but it's the same analogy that you've talked about, where we have this destination in our mind, and then we reverse engineer it, all the steps, we see the whole ladder, and we put on our blinders, and we just like brute force our way through until we get there. And the problem, as you've come to see, and as I've come to see, and many others, is that oftentimes when you get to that destination, it doesn't feel like what you thought it would, even if that destination exists and you can accomplish that. But, to come back to my story, I was so depressed. I started having like severe anxiety attacks. I would I think this sort of encapsulates it. I started setting my alarm 30 minutes early in the morning so that I could like have a complete breakdown in the shower before I went to work and still arrive on time, because if I didn't account for that, I'd be late. But like seeing like, oh, maybe it's really problematic if
I shouldn't be having these every morning.
And so eventually, I realized I was either going to fall apart in public or I was going to fall apart in private. And there were a few things leading up to that. There was this promotion that I was like, heads down, I'm going to make this happen. And I got the promotion. And when it happened, I thought I was going to feel like this elation and this freedom, and I felt nothing. And so that was the beginning of this, like, who am I doing this for? And so I ended up quitting my job with no plan, and, everyone thought I was totally insane. And I thought that it was going to feel like total freedom, and like I was going to want to scream from the rooftops. And in reality, there was like a whole other ego death and processing that had to happen as I started to look around like, okay, someone has to be able to help me with this. Like, I had no income. No one was supporting me. I like sold a bunch of Google stock to give myself some space. But I really had no idea what I was going to do. And my only mission was, there has to be a way to do this whole career thing in a way that doesn't frankly make me feel like I want to die every day. And, I went to therapy, which is wonderful. And it wasn't like getting me a job. It wasn't really like actionable. And I was like, this is great, but I don't have 5 years to like wait for the transformation on this. And coaching wasn't a thing in the way that it is now. There were like executive coaches, and that was like how to climb the ladder faster. And I was like, no, that's not what I want. And then there were like super woo coaches, which I'm also a huge fan of, but I'm also have a very A-type, like analytical side of me too. And that wasn't scratching that itch. Like I didn't feel like, the language of like surrender and let go and let the universe and blah, blah, blah. All of that is important and true, but I needed a more analytical way in. And eventually I went on the meditation retreats, I did the yoga, all the things, and read the books and took the classes. And eventually I kind of stumbled into a coaching class, and I took the foundations class, and I just fell in love with it. Like, it clicked in a way that no other framework or methodology really had. And then, of course, I promptly didn't go back because I was like, well, this is too fun and makes too much sense. And so clearly that's not
I can't do this
for work, right? Like, there's no way this could be actual work and like a career or make a living. And eventually I did go back. And in that process, to get certified, you had to do 100 hours of paid coaching. And so I sent an email to a few friends, and I was just like, if anyone wants to be my guinea pig, like, I'll coach you for a cup of coffee. And much to my surprise, I was sort of like kicking and screaming on the whole coaching thing because there was a lot of ego involved. I was like, who goes to Stanford and becomes a coach? Like, that's not a thing. And I was very skeptical of a lot of pieces of it in the industry in general. And I still have, skepticism. But the feedback I was getting was like, this is transformative. And it was transforming my life as well. And before I even finished the certification process, those people were renewing for more sessions, and they were referring people to me. And I had this like whole roster of clients who weren't even necessarily coming to me for like what I learned in coaching training, but for this sort of other methodology that I was building out based on my own experience and as I continued to work with these people. And the more I shared my story, I came to realize just how many of us there were that had this situation where like we had done all the right things and we fulfilled this, we thought that we would, if we did all the right things, if we made the right decision, went to the right school and the right job and whatever, we'd be happy. And we weren't. And it was like, who are we doing this for? Is this all there is? Like, I can't do this for another, 40, 50 years. And I realized it was an epidemic. There were so many of us, and nobody was talking about it. In the way that, like, especially post-COVID, there's more people, I'm delighted, there's more people talking about burnout and like anti-hustle culture and all that stuff, but there wasn't that at the time. And I was like, what is going on? Like, who is this group of people? We need a name. And what is going on that created the conditions for this, and how do we not recreate those? How do we recover from those things individually and systemically? And so that was sort of how I came to understand us as underfulfilled overachievers, and really working on, creating a body of work or a methodology that could help us. And to my great surprise, there actually turned out to be a process that works for everyone that I have met. The results are going to be different for everyone. The process is going to be completely different and customized and like bespoke to the individual. But the steps and the outline of the process and kind of the phases we go through are consistent and repeatable. And I think that was the most sort of hopeful or optimistic thing that I found, is like fulfillment is possible, and it's closer than you think. It's not this like urban myth in the way that I think a lot of us maybe have come to believe.
Can we get into those? Because I know I've shared about my experience, very similar to yours. I would label it as an overachieving, anxious type, where I was always anxious, but it was also because I felt I had to live up to these standards, and I had to reach these certain achievements, because that was the pressure that was put on me from the outside world, from my parents, from myself many times. And I mean, you know this because this is why we started working together, but especially now at this point in my career, I had just felt like I achieved all of the things I had wanted, checked off all of the boxes, certain dream guests, certain download numbers, certain following, certain network, whatever, and then realizing I'm not actually happy, and this isn't how I want to be spending all of my time. There are other things. There are parts of my job that make me very happy and I love it. And then there are parts where I wish I was doing other things and I just simply don't feel fulfilled by it. And I think fulfillment is so important, especially when you've had a taste of it and you can understand conceptually what it feels like. So what are the steps for anyone listening? And obviously they're not going to get this entire process from this episode, but what are some tangible steps that these people can take?
Yeah. Quickly though, What do you feel like you did? You'd mentioned the like blinders analogy that you talked about with JP Morgan. Do you feel like you fell into that same sort of thing in like a different context this time?
Yes, in a sense. I think about that. When I think about back to my JP days, it was more for me internal of everything was so fast paced and those blinders were so real because I would have an anxiety. I would feel my chest tightening and my entire skin buzzing when I was waiting in a line at Sweet Green that was too long. Because in my mind, that was so much wasted time and everything had to go fast, 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 fast.
Yep.
So a lot of the blinders were almost also around that, where it was how I thought we were all living our life was at this fast-paced intensity. There was no time for rest. There was no time for anything. I even caught myself, this was years ago when I worked there, but having conversations with my mom and being like, get to the point. What are you saying? Talk faster. I just had no ability to relax. And I think with this recent instance, it's less that, but it's more so that I just have put a lot of pressure on myself. And yes, of course, there's pressure when you're the person who's like in charge of the decisions and the money and all of those things. And it's very correlated on whether you get a paycheck. I think it was more so that I took on so many things based on what I saw other people doing and feeling like that was what I had to be doing, because if they were a creator and they were doing that and they were seeing success in it, then I should also do it. But then it was almost like I was hoarding all of those things.
Right.
And then I hit a point where I was just doing way too many things that I wasn't able to actually succeed at any of them or enjoy them.
Right.
Yeah. And I know we talk about this, but also it was just for me, I feel so incredibly aligned and fulfilled when I'm parenting and when I'm with my boys. And I noticed it was having a drastically negative impact on my ability to be present and with them and enjoy my time with them. And I also want to highlight that my job is so fucking cushy compared to many jobs. So this isn't like, I by no means is my job, I actually don't think my job is hard. I just think I work hard.
Yeah.
And I become really obsessive and critical of myself, and kind of like we talk about, I'm a productivity junkie and hoarder, where I just feel I always need to be doing something. And in an industry like this, there actually is always something you can be doing.
Yep.
So that's where I think it's confusing. Like with my past job, I was able to leave at 5 and I was just done.
Yeah.
And with this, when you're in charge of everything and there is always something to do, and it does correlate with your sometimes financial gains, it's hard to ever turn that off.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think, the other thing that I don't think I've even used this term with you before, but there's this, I call it like life plagiarism, where we see someone else's life and we're like, that is how you do it. That's how I need to do it. And I think especially in your line of work, I mean, I think this exists for everyone, but especially for this line of work where you need to look, or you do look to other people of like, what are they doing that's working? And there's nothing wrong with looking at best practices and seeing what like inspires you versus what doesn't inspire you. But when you take that wholesale and adopt it as like your own dream, and then you forget to reassess, to calibrate along the way. And I actually see this happening to more and more people who like leave the big corporate thing and they're like, oh, I'm now doing my dream thing, whether it's, something like I'm doing like coaching or, whatever, they're building their own thing. And they're like, now I've made it. Like now I found fulfillment. But then they think that's the destination, right? So then they don't stop to be like, oh no, I need to keep evolving and keep tweaking and keep testing and learning and iterating as my life changes, as I evolve, as my interests change. And the other thing you mentioned about having one of the realizations be seeing that you're not present with your son, which also was a parallel to, realizing that one of the tells for you that something was off was being like impatient with your mom or, someone else, that like they're not talking fast enough. I think that's always a really good indicator of things being out of alignment, is when it's taking away, like not only like things are out of alignment in your work itself. It's not only that the balance is off between like time spent in work and time spent in life, but like even the things you're focusing on when you're focusing on work needed to be reevaluated for you.
Absolutely.
And so noticing that, I think that's, we tend to think of it as very separate and like, oh, what this means is that I need to spend more time with my children. And maybe that is what it means. probably is part of it, but it's also it's also a tell for your work of like, if I'm not able to be present over here, then something is off over here. Okay, so steps. So yes, the first thing that we need to do is to recognize it. So this is, most people don't realize that they're productivity hoarding, or that there is another way, as you talked about. They're in those blinders. Right. So that they are compulsive achieving, or that they're living in an out of alignment way, that there's an opportunity to live in a different way. So the first thing is to recognize and be able to admit to yourself, I am not happy, and I'm willing to consider that there's another way to do it. And it's not your fault. Mm-hmm. And you didn't do anything wrong. This is how you were trained. It's a very rational reaction to white supremacist, patriarchal capitalism. And this is what you were told, right? I call it the achievement lie. We were taught that if you achieve enough, you will be happy enough. And the more you achieve, the happier you will be. And the thing that I've discovered in doing this work, that it's not achievement that leads to fulfillment, it's alignment. So I am not anti-ambition. This is not like trad wife, whatever, unless that is what's aligned for you. Ambition to me is just the desire for more life, desire to have a contribution. And I think that's amazing, and we should all embrace that in whatever the capacity, that whatever you're ambitious for. But the key differentiator is to aligned ambition. So ambition that is uniquely and particularly well suited to you versus generic ambition, which is like, to use an extreme example, like President of the United States is not going to be the thing for everyone, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's not going to fulfill everyone. So that's the first thing, recognizing it and giving yourself permission to change. The second thing is alignment. And this is the part that I know for me, for example, when I had gotten so far away from myself and knowing what I wanted or cared about or liked, that when I did leave and I started to ask myself that question, I had no idea how to answer it.
I think a lot of people are stuck there.
Right. And so the next part before you can get into action is you have to figure out how to listen to yourself. I like to call it your inner navigation system. It's, you can call it intuition, you can call it your inner compass, your inner GPS, whatever it is. But the idea here is that you do have an inner navigation system that knows your true north. It knows where you should be going. Mm-hmm. Should meaning uniquely well suited to you. It knows what's aligned for you. And we have just been trained out of thinking about it. Most of us think that voice is a distraction, the voice that says, hey, maybe Google's not for you. My interpretation of that was like, oh, good, that's a voice, that's fear, right? Like that's a voice for me to triumph over.
And prove wrong.
Right. And in reality, what we need to learn is how to listen to that voice. And so there's a lot of ways that you can do this. But one of the things that starts small, I guess, is the first thing I would say in terms of your daily decisions, like what you're wearing or what you're eating. And there's kind of a basic exercise that I call calibrating your inner navigation system, where you think of something that you know is not aligned for you. So something that like really makes you unhappy, or a person, it could be a politician, it could be an ex-partner, it could be an ex-job. For my example, that would be Google, right? It was not aligned for me. And try it on and feel it in your body. Because the thing that I think most of us also have forgotten or weren't taught in the first place is that this voice, the language of this voice, is a felt sense. It's somatic. It's in your body. It is not in your brain. Your fear self is what lives in your brain. There's a Buddhist expression, your mind is a terrible master, but a wonderful servant. And the idea is like, we want to use our brain, yes, to like kick the tires or, double check on things or get things done. Your brain is wonderful. But your very intelligent brain is not going to be the thing that figures out what is aligned for you. Mm-hmm. And so we need to learn how to tune into a different intelligence, which I think most of us have been trained out of. So feeling what that Google, whatever your equivalent of that is in your body. For most people, the shorthand I use is hard and heavy. It usually feels like tight, stressed, anxiety. For me, like I feel like my heart races, my throat, my chest and my throat get a little tight. I usually start talking faster. If I think about like, what if someone told me I had to go work there again tomorrow? Like it feels bad. And then I think of the opposite, which is like coaching or whatever the work is that I'm doing now, the writing and speaking and teaching. And that feels, for shorthand, light and right. And so think of your two poles and whatever your equivalent of that is and what that feels like in your body, and learn that, and then start to move through the world like a game of warmer, colder. And the key thing here is that you do not need to know exactly where you're going in order to begin. And this kind of brings us into the next phase.
Right. Before we get into that, I just think about in the sense of alignment. I know I've talked about this on social, but it's something that I feel really strongly about once I really started to acknowledge it. And you mentioned it, is even just the way you dress. This was something that was huge for me, where I felt I would see when I left the industry other creators, and I was now a creator, if I saw the way they dressed or the outfits they put on or whatever, or even how they spent their time, I felt, oh, that's how I should be looking. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. I should be dressed to the nines with a full face of glam and, you know, in a new piece of clothing every single day. That, to me, is so not aligned with who I am. And even in the sense of dresses, you know, people wearing a preppy, floral, bright, flowy dress. If I put that on my body, I immediately am like, who the fuck am I? I want a loose baggy pant and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
And I've thought about this a lot when I get dressed for recordings, because I'll see other people in their video clips from recordings, for instance, looking so trendy, so quote unquote put together in a full fit. And then when I go to get dressed for my recordings, if I go to look at something like that, I realize that's actually not at all what I want. And it might actually be what they want. I'm not saying they're dressing apart.
Totally.
That might
it might be aligned for them. Yeah.
But it could not be farther than aligned for me. Yeah. And I think that that was such a good place for me to start a year ago or a few months ago, when I really started to focus on that and leaning in hard to what do actually I want to wear, not what do I see other people wear, or what do I feel like I should be wearing. And I think that that is such a small example of this whole conversation, because again, so many of us do things, especially for our career, of what do I feel I should be doing?
Yeah. And that was actually a big one for me too, where I was like, oh, this like business casual, like pantsuit, whatever, was like not like all of that needed to go. That was so not, you know, not me. And a lot of people starting there where the stakes are low is so important.
Yeah.
Because it's a great way, you'll start to feel into, oh, this feels good, that, you know, and you can experiment with it. And the thing is, once you have a sense of what it feels like, and it's a muscle, you know, you get into the practice of listening to, oh, this feels like me, this does not feel like me. And then when you're making bigger decisions, whether that's dating, job, home, like whatever it is, those decisions will feel easier because you're practiced at identifying what feels good and what doesn't feel good for you.
Right.
And you also brought up a really important point, which is that we can't tell alignment from the outside. Like, I can tell alignment only when I'm, you know, working with a client who's like sharing authentically of their experience of something, and then I can identify it. But you can't see someone walking down the street and be like, oh, that outfit is aligned for them, or that isn't aligned for them.
You don't think so?
Well, I was going to say, I think you can get a vibe when someone is like fully themselves and when something's off, but I don't know that you can know exactly what's off.
Fair. I agree with that.
And there's actually David White, the like poet, he has a quote where he talks about humans are the only people who the danger where we mask, like he gives an example of, you know, a crow is just a crow. It doesn't pretend to be an owl, you know, or a tiger. Humans are the only things that will mask and then get so good at the masking that they forget who they were originally.
Yes.
And so I do think like probably people could tell something, especially in the end, like, okay, she's not feeling like at Google when I was at Google. But I don't think people were like, oh, this is not an aligned career for her, you know?
Right.
Like,
I get that.
So I think sometimes, so with caveats, but I think you can tell when someone is fully themselves.
Fully aligned.
I don't know if you can tell as much or what exactly is off when they're not aligned.
So let's get into directional versus destinational.
Yeah. So once
destinational.
Yeah. So once you have a sense of like what is warmer or colder for you, the next key piece to understand that the second place a lot of people get stuck is what I call the orient phase. And orient has to do with how we start moving forward. And the key thing that people get wrong is that they think they have to know exactly where they're going in order to begin. So, you might think, oh, I can't leave JP Morgan until I know exactly what my next career is going to be. Or I can't leave Google until I know exactly what the next thing is going to be. And so then people will sit, at their computer or whatever and like try to make a million pros and cons lists and spreadsheets, or just like sit there and be like, I'm going to think really hard about what this next thing is and I'm going to figure it out. And the reality is that clarity comes in motion. You really can't get the information that you need about what is aligned for you while you're staying still. So we want to make the shift from the old way of thinking, which is destinational thinking or destinational living, where you pick whatever you're going to be doing in 5 years or 10 years and you reverse engineer it, you know all of the steps, and then you put on your blinders and you blind ambition, brute force your way to the end. The problem with that is that it doesn't give you or the world a chance to evolve. So you may not like what that destination is when you get there or anywhere along the way. And by putting the blinders on and committing to that destination, which we do because it feels safer, right? If we think like, I know exactly where I'm going, this is a guarantee, this is the like safe job. We feel like we will know exactly where we're going. We feel better about it, but we're not paying attention to all of the things along the way that may be like, oh, this isn't right for you. Or, oh, you thought that that influencer was a good model for you, but actually like this creator is a better model for you. And you ignore those things because you're so set on that destination. And the other issue with it is that when we think of destinations in the future, those are inherently shoulds. Those are inherently things that are based on external expectations and not based on what we want, because our inner navigation system or intuition can only be responsive to what's happening in the present. It can only make that single next directionally right, warmer decision. And so that doesn't mean we have to be aimless, right? So the way we want to transition, and what I've found is really, the way to recover or the way out of underfulfilled overachieverness is directional living. So it's understanding that we only need to know the next directionally right step in order to move forward. And that is enough. How do we know what's directionally right? It's what's warmer, or where our curiosity is leading us, or where joy is, right? So that's why it's so important. Happiness, right, is so important, because that's actually the building block of fulfillment. You can't be fulfilled if you aren't following your curiosity and your joy along the way. If you're bored, resentful, annoyed, unhappy, you're not actually moving anywhere near fulfillment. You're not going to be fulfilled at the destination. And so recovering those sense of things, and it's sort of like an analogy I like to use sometimes is it's like cravings for food. You might have a craving for, like, let's say an orange if your body is craving vitamin C. The craving is there to show you where the nourishment is. Curiosity and joy are, I call them like curiosity cravings. They're there to show you where the soul nourishment is.
I love that.
And curiosity is the best proxy that we have for our purpose, right? So we can't like dream up our purpose in advance. Curiosity is the thing that's like the seeds or the clues and the scavenger hunt that are showing us how to get to our purpose. So as long as we're following our curiosity, we are on purpose. We're on our way there.
It's so fascinating because I agree with everything you're saying. And I think it's helpful to provide an example even.
Yeah.
When I think about, for me, my career change, when I left, I did sit down and I spreadsheeted my way through the whole thought process, wrote all the pro-cons lists, and wrote out a business plan. And obviously, I think business plans are important. There's so much that needs to be done when you're making a big decision, especially when finances come to play, when we're talking about career. But the business plan I wrote out, if I look at that, and I did look at it recently, and compare it to what I'm doing now, they could not be more different. And that's where it's the perfect example of, I left thinking I was going to meal prep in people's homes. That's what I was doing. I was health coaching. I was like hoping to get one sponsored post a month. There was no concept of a podcast. TikTok did not exist yet. It was a completely different dream than what I'm actually doing now, which feels way more aligned. Like, I don't even want to cook anymore. So the idea of cooking for other people is an even more of a nightmare. And I just find that is really interesting for me to reflect on when you're saying all this, of if I had just kept pushing and pushing.
Can you imagine if you were like, no, this is it. It has to be this. It has to look like this.
I would be so unhappy.
Yep. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. I'm not saying it can be useful to create a business plan as inspiration.
Right.
I call it sort of like your big direction, right? It's like, this is another way to think about it is the scientific method for life, right? It's your hypothesis. This is what I think is happening. But the goal of the scientific method, as you experiment and you test, is not to prove yourself right. It's to find out the truth. Right? So it's useful to have kind of like, okay, here's where I think I'm heading, and I'm going to take a step in that direction. But then in every step you say, what's warmer and what's colder? Can you imagine if you were like, TikTok, nope, not part of the business plan? And that's what I meant about, like, it doesn't allow you or the world to evolve, is that so much changes that we can't anticipate when we are locked into some plan.
Completely.
That you'd be like, TikTok can't be part of my work. And you'd miss out on this huge opportunity that got you closer to fulfillment.
Yeah. Or, I mean, podcast is the biggest example for me because it's where I feel the most myself. Yeah. It's what I enjoy the most. I love it. And it's where I feel I connect the most with people, which to me is really aligned, connecting with people and sharing and exploring and helping others feel seen. And that was never even a concept for me at that time.
Right.
I want to dig into this a step further because I can already imagine the question coming, and I think someone did submit it, of like, okay, but what if I don't have the financial privilege to stop what I'm doing to then assess what do I want to do? Do you know what I mean? Because I think there is privilege that has to be obviously acknowledged in this.
Totally. So I think there's like two levels of privilege, or I mean, there's many levels of privilege. But for starters, like this is, of course, if your basic needs aren't met, that's a very different story.
Right.
So I'm going to, for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to assume that like basic needs are met. But that doesn't mean most people can't just leave their jobs with no plan. And my hope is that I did that so other people don't have to. Of course, I will also say that, you know, if you can expedite things with financial support, meaning you can quit your job. You can take 3 months to explore, 6 months or a year. You can hire a coach. You can do all these things that not everyone can do. But the thing that is amazing to me about this method is that you don't have to do any of those things. This can be done by anyone in any phase of their life. You do not need to quit your job or blow up your whole life in order to make changes. So this goes back to sort of what we were talking about with the warmer, colder, talking about like your clothes. This can be done. You can start anywhere. Right? You don't need to have like a business plan, you know, that you think you're going to, you know, need investors and VC and this whole time. Like, we don't need to be making grand gestures and plans here, or even have any vision. Like, it's great if you have a sense of your big direction. If you don't, you can still start. And so this would look like starting anywhere. What is one thing you can do every day that feels more directionally right? So this could look like identifying, you know, I often have people look at their calendar, work and personal, and write out every single thing maybe for the last month and the next month that you're doing, and go through and sort of like taste test each one and see, is this aligned or is this not aligned? And you can do it on a scale of 0 to 10 or just, you know, in the warmer, colder. What are the things that feel like, oh, this was awesome, I love this, or I can't wait to do this? And what are the things that you're like, oh yeah, I hope that gets canceled, or like I was miserable? And then you can start to be like, okay, wow, I'm noticing now that maybe it's not that I hate my whole industry and I need to quit my whole job. It's just that like this one client or this one team or meetings before 9 a.m. or meetings on Fridays or, you know, commuting or whatever the thing is. You can start to identify smaller pieces of things, and it's like, what can I change? You may not be able to change the whole thing, but what starts to happen is when you start to shift one thing, more things start to shift. So our only job is to move the plot forward any amount. So that could mean wearing something that feels more aligned for you. This can also mean taking actions to follow your curiosity that don't cost any money. This could be reading a book that you take out from the library. This could be listening to a podcast. This could be spending an hour sitting in the park. If you're like, you know what, I really wish I had more time to watch birds. I have no idea. Whatever the thing is, it has more to do with the mindset shift, and any small action is working to recalibrate your inner navigation system, which changes the way you move through the world and the way that you see things. So I don't want to deny that you can expedite things if you can, focus all of your time on figuring this out, but that is not necessary. I've never encountered someone who didn't have some action they could take that moved the plot forward or moved them into, 1 degree turns into more alignment from where they were. And it's almost, sometimes call it the rule of begetting. Like, fulfillment begets fulfillment, alignment begets alignment. The more, if we make one shift into alignment, more things start to come together.
I fully agree. I mean, I notice it with myself even. There's absolutely no question. I also think one other thing is people you're spending time with. Who are you spending time with, and are you leaving feeling fulfilled and happy and, oh my God, that was so fun? Or are you leaving feeling drained? And are you dreading these social things? I even think about this in the sense of the way that I spend time with my friends. My favorite thing to do with my girlfriends when we hang out is meet up after our kids go down in our pajamas on someone's couch and have a bunch of can and just giggle and laugh and have fun. The idea of like getting all dolled up and dressed up and going into the city for a big dinner and getting home late and going to sleep super late and then feeling exhausted the next day, that actually does not fulfill me. Even though that's what we've been told a quote unquote girls' night is,
Yeah.
And I think that even that is a small step of who are you spending time with and how are you spending time.
Yeah, and hopefully those things would come up in your calendar, right? Where it's like, okay, I mean. So, and, we, in our work, one of the first things I send to everyone is like a 360 whole life inventory, right? What's working, what's not working in every aspect of your life. And so, this would be, it's looking at every part of your life. It isn't just looking at career. You can make changes in lots of different parts. And for people who feel like, oh, I think my career needs to change, but I don't know how to change that, I usually say, okay, stop looking at your career, go look in the other places.
Right.
And what tends to happen is the more you change, like who you're socializing with, how you're spending your time. I have people who it's like they go to yoga every day and they're like, I don't even like yoga. And then it's like, oh, I need to I was doing it because I thought that was the thing I should be doing for like wellness, right? And it's like, that's out of alignment for you. And how many other things in your life are you doing that are like that?
Yes. And my other question, I just want to go back for a second in terms of like the underfulfilled overachiever. I meant to ask this in the beginning and I never did. Can you give a definition or what you would define that to be? And then B, why do we think overachieving is such a compliment? Because that's what I think gets us in this stratosphere of misalignment, is that we're seeking these achievements because we believe an overachiever is a compliment when we're told it, and then we end up in a place that actually isn't even where we are destined to be.
Yeah. So an underfulfilled overachiever is someone who has checked all the boxes, done all of the right things, and still finds themselves unhappy, wondering if this is all there is, and seeking fulfillment and wanting something more. And this usually goes along with several symptoms, one of them being compulsive productivity and or compulsive achievement. And what you just mentioned is that. So it's such great branding, overachieving, because it sounds like a compliment, right? In the same way that like being a perfectionist sounds like a compliment. I totally been like, yeah, I'm an overachiever. Oh yeah, I'm a perfectionist. Like, but in reality, we think that more is better, right? But what it actually is compulsive achieving. That's what overachieving actually is doing it compulsively without intention, almost without choice, right? Like you aren't really at choice how to do it intentionally, and you can't really even stop yourself. And it's sort of what you're talking about also, where we're achieving even when it doesn't make sense for our lives. We're like spilling over in the sense that we're taking away from ourselves and our lives and our fulfillment by achieving, not over in the sense of, do more is better. Some of the other symptoms are, we mentioned in passing, like productivity hoarding.
Yeah, what is that? For people who
And
don't
that's
know?
an example, I would say, that, overachieving or compulsive achieving is kind of like what it looks like on a macro scale, like more degrees and all of those things. Productivity hoarding is a similar aspect, but it's the busyness, right? I think of it more in like the day-to-day level versus the macro level.
This is me to a T. I mean, it's very much how I was raised.
Yeah.
Yes, it is my mom and I to a T.
And, it's so interesting. I think COVID was a really good example of this because so many people, what happens with productivity hoarding, when people are hoarders, the reason they do it is because psychologically they think it's keeping them safe, right? If they have more, on whatever level subconsciously, it feels like I need all of these things to stay safe because maybe I'll need it and this is going to protect me in some way from whatever it is. Same thing with productivity. And when COVID hit and people were at home and terrified, understandably, we didn't have a lot of information. We were scared for our lives. All of this stuff was like an actual threat. People were like, I'm going to bake banana bread. I'm going to decide that I'm going to write my screenplay. I'm going to learn a new language. And again, none of those things are inherently bad or wrong, but it was like this idea that suddenly everyone was like, this is going to be the most productive time of my life. And, I was talking to so many people who are like, what did you do today? Well, I did this and I did this and I did this and I worked out and I blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to start this project. And I think, again, that was a reaction. To me, it was like case in point of a reaction to feeling unsafe and insecure that makes us do that. And I think, again, if you are in aligned productivity, there's purposeful productivity, which is like, this is on purpose. There's a reason for this productivity that is, again, like moving the plot forward. Again, not all productivity is bad. And it's important for us to achieve the things that we want to achieve and are meant to achieve. But on the flip side of it, there's also productivity that is kind of the overproducing, where you're doing it not because it's actually useful to you. You're doing it to make yourself feel in control, or feel safer or feel more secure. And that's the thing we want to really watch out for.
And I'm curious, I say this because I'm curious because of what I just mentioned, of the way that I was raised and seeing that. And I don't know what's nature versus nurture, but I think about this a lot as I raise children.
Yeah.
Are there things we can do to instill in them beliefs that would not lead them to then become productivity hoarders or underfulfilled overachievers or any of those things? Like, how are there tips that you have?
Yeah. So, candidly, I'm like, this should be my next book. Like, this is, with a 2-year-old, I'm like, I don't know when it will be, but this is what I want to start researching also. And it is so interesting because I think about it all the time, because one of, what kids are motivated by attention, right? So it's like, what are you paying attention to? But it's not that you don't want to pay attention to, them learning things or enjoying reading or whatever, all of these different things. So I don't know the exact answer. What I know is I want to really, and less of focusing on the things that I don't want to do, I'm thinking about the things that I really want to focus on, which are curiosity and joy. And so I think that, again, is like the antidote to all of this. If you can ask yourself, like, why am I doing this thing? Am I doing it because I'm curious about it or it brings me joy? And again, sometimes, the pushback to this is always like, but what about doing dishes, or what about whatever these other things are? And I would say that those things are aligned when they're connected to the vision of like the way you want your household to run or the way you want your house to feel. And again, we could get into things with like division of labor in the house and all of those things. But again, I think there's a subtlety to this, but there's, in general, it's getting a sense of not all productivity is good productivity. Productivity is not universally good. It's about what you're spending your time focusing on. And so I think the emphasis to me is this something you're excited about? Is this something you're enjoying? And again, modeling that, right? So really.
Yeah. I just asked because it's feeling prevalent right now with my 4-year-old. And my husband and I were having this conversation the other night where our kids have complete different interests. Like, they could not be more different if they tried. And I've been so proud of us for providing this space for both of them to pursue the things that they are interested in.
Yep.
And there are times where my husband and I have a hard time because specifically one of our kids is not at all interested. That's something that we are passionate about and we love to do, and we want him to be, and we want him to play with us, and we want it, you know.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I was like, we can't make him.
Yeah.
Like, if he really has no fucking interest, we cannot make him.
Yeah.
Because that will just form resentment.
Yep.
And so I just feel it's now something, yes, I've been paying attention to within myself with working with you, but really trying to pay attention to even as a parent of, okay, if he's curious about this, how do we then go have fun with it and go do something about it?
I think the way that I would think about that is, yes, about the curiosity and the joy and not making people, you know, do things that they don't want to do. But I think there is a way, there's also like, what is a family and reciprocity and that kind of thing where you don't have to try to convince him to like the thing he doesn't like. You can, I think there's a way to acknowledge, like, we know this isn't your favorite, but we really like to do this. So it would be great if sometimes you came along to that, and then vice versa, like, you really love this thing and we're going to all go do that thing with you too. And so I don't think that it has to be like, no one should ever do anything that doesn't feel like natural, like, you know, uncomfortable for them. There's a relationship dynamic or a family dynamic in it. But yeah, but that's a little different also than like productivity.
No, I agree. Productivity, I also try to think of where I'm like, okay, just because I saw things always getting accomplished and done and not really relaxing, I think that also played a role in my inherent need to do the same thing. Yeah. And it's something that I try to do, of just simply being. Yeah,
because what you were modeled is like, this is how one adults, right? Yeah. Like, this is what, and that's what you, exactly. And so I think relaxing or just like enjoying and modeling that. And again, modeling like your own curiosity of like, and interests of, oh, mom's like really interested in this new thing and I'm exploring that. And I think narrating some of our life can be really helpful too, especially as they get older. Yeah.
A listener question on kind of this topic is how to find fulfilling work if I feel I have zero passion. Because I think this is something that a lot of people, especially when you are run to the ground, whether you have kids or not, you feel like you don't have the time to explore hobbies, and then all of a sudden time goes by and you're like, I don't have a hobby. What am I even passionate about? What am I curious about? What would your advice be to someone who feels that way?
Yeah. So to me, I always say, like, forget your purpose, forget your passion, and follow your curiosity. I know you lump those two things together, but I think they're a little bit different. Okay, and fair. The reason I say this is that a lot of us, again, to me, purpose and passion have become destinations, right? Where we think we have to like define our passion, and it's like, these are the people who are passionate about something and these are the people who aren't. And if you're not someone who's like has a passion, like ending world hunger, like whatever, curing cancer, again, those are wonderful things, but not everyone has something that's like driving them innately, you know, that kind of mission. That is okay. And you want to start with uncovering your curiosity. Now, this could be anything, and it doesn't have to be related to something you think that has to do with your career. So we need to put a pause on the like, I need to change my career and I need to figure out what that is. And yes, to the burnout part, I would start with you need to do anything to recover a sense of joy. So this could be things, I often tell people to think about it in like a 3-month experiment type of chunk, because that often feels more manageable. You're not quitting your job. Don't even try to change your job in this time. And I would say like radically say no to anything that you don't want to be doing that isn't essential for your paid work, right? So, or for your life or your kids. So no to any socializing that you aren't truly excited about. Like, you can always go back to it if you want to later, but like no to random happy hours. Like, create some space however you can. And then just focus on like, what would feel fun to me? And this can be a really hard question at first. Yeah. But it's worth asking. And it can be anything. It can be reading a romance novel. It can be going to a museum. Again, in in my book, I have like a bunch of questions that can help you sort of try to figure out what some of these things are, like to brainstorm and figure out where to start. But I think the biggest thing is disconnecting it from the like career change or the fulfillment or the purpose or the passion, because a lot of times what happens is you could be like, oh, you know what really makes me happy is, I don't know, like playing pickleball. That's like all the, and then immediately you're like, yeah, but that has nothing to do with my career. So why would I waste my time doing that when I have to change my career? It's more connected than you think. Because if you can start to recover that sense of joy and curiosity, you're going to start to have more joy and curiosity. When you have more joy and curiosity, you're going to be able to take more aligned actions that will eventually help you to start seeing where you can start to turn your career. So I think, again, taking away the like, I need a passion or I need a purpose and like those big questions, because what happens when you ask yourself that question? Most of us shut down.
Completely.
Like our brain starts short circuiting and we're like, fuck. And then we just stay in the job that we're in. And that's how we get stuck. So this is why this is like one of the best anti-anxieties around, is like the way to get unstuck is like the single small action and telling yourself, and not, this is true, I believe this wholeheartedly, that like playing the pickleball or, you know, whatever the thing is that feels interesting to you. Maybe it's recovering something that you were interested in as a kid or in your 20s, or going to a class or whatever it is, watching a class online. And sort of you start to move through the world looking for these joy sparkers. And that in and of itself starts to transform things. So forget the purpose and the passion, start to cultivate and recover a sense of curiosity and joy, even when you don't know where it's going to lead, and trust that those, again, are the best proxies for your purpose. You will get there.
It's interesting. I'm just looking through all the listener questions now, and like so many of them I feel would be the same answer. How to navigate balancing choosing a career you enjoy with one that provides the money you need, how to assess whether my current job aligns with my personal values and long-term goals, best starting point for someone who wants to reassess and know I need a new job, but I don't know what. Like, I think so many people want change and don't know where to start, but they are at the starting point of realizing this isn't correct, and now where the fuck do I go? But I will ask this one because I do think that it is kind of different, even though I just lumped it in with those. But how do you navigate when it comes to, and obviously everyone's going to be different, we don't know anyone's specific financial means, but balancing the choosing of a career you enjoy with one that provides the money you need? Advice on navigating that dance, because I think a lot of people are in that.
Yeah. So to me, alignment is holistic in your life. Something is not aligned for you if it means like, I'm excited about it, but I make $0 and therefore I'm going to be financially insecure. And then I'm going to be anxious all the time. And then I'm going to be stressed. And then I'm not going to be following joy and curiosity. And that is a route to sabotage. So again, to me, it's going to be a step-by-step decision that you're going to evaluate as you go. So you may have an idea of like, and I do think it's a useful question, like if I didn't have to think about money, what would I do? Or how would I spend my time? I think that's a great inquiry. That's not realistic for most people, for any amount of time or for life. But use that as like a vision, a direction, your big direction. And then it's like, okay, maybe one day I'll be able to do that in full, whatever that thing is that makes no money or whatever, or requires some sort of like entrepreneurial risk that I don't know how the payoff will be. But what is something I can do to get a flavor of that or get closer to that? Or what is that vision telling me that's something that I can bring close to myself right now? And each decision you're going to have to make, again, what is directionally right for you right now factors in all of the circumstances of your life. So it may be, okay, so what is directionally right for me right now is taking, I can't not work at all, but maybe I'm doing 4 days a week. Or, maybe I'm deciding like whatever the gray area is for you, right? Like I'm going to do this in this way on the side. I'm going to, just not be like doing a whole side hustle and burning myself out, but I'm going to be like taking classes or just like spending more time. Like maybe I go to one conference a year with these people in this other job that I might want to take. Or maybe it's, going to night school or whatever, something along those lines while you're still working, and like investing in the side of yourself, even if you can't full on invest in it as soon as you would like to. And then seeing how that changes over time. Or it's keeping the job and like saving money for this other thing, like with that specific intent in mind. Sometimes that can transform how it feels to be doing that job that may not be like your ultimate fulfillment or your ultimate alignment, but is aligned for right now. And I think the key thing here, and this is true for many of those questions, is the key question we're asking in directional living is, what is directionally right or aligned for me right now, right? So the key things there are for me, right? Not for the other person, not for my mom, not for my husband, not for whoever else, not for the other creator or the other coach, for me and right now. This doesn't mean this is going to be right for me in a year. It doesn't mean it would be right for me a year ago. Circumstances change all the time, and we have to give ourselves space to evolve with that.
Yeah, and for allowing them to change. Well, this was so helpful and beneficial. I mean, for me, I get to benefit from you during our calls, but I think it'll be so helpful for so many. For people who want more of you, where can they best support you?
Yeah, well, you can find me on Instagram at Megan Hellerer, and my website, meganhellerer.com. And then mostly if anything about this was interesting or resonant for you, my book, Directional Living, A Transformational Guide to Fulfillment in Work and Life, is out. And yeah, I would love to share that and contribute to the eradication of underfulfilled overachievers everywhere.
Everything will be linked in the show notes, but thank you so much.
Thank you.